Um, it's January 19th. It's a Wednesday, 2022. This is really a confusing time for me because I'm now in such a place where every avenue, road, or opportunity, I mean, like, it's been that way, it feels like, in hindsight when I look back. Um, After whatever happened in 1993, where I said goodbye but was waiting on until we meet again, um, and then almost like put into a medically induced coma or some time dysphoria or some time dysplasia. I mean, like, when you have a foundation and a fellow or and a fellowship relationship that doesn't ever come to fruition or is never initiated properly or is not followed up on at galactic level of importance, for whatever reason the ear things do whatever they do, it's a sign that there's a major problem globally, planetary, galactically, solar system. I mean, like, whatever level of life cell between a 10 to the negative 35th power up to a 10 to the positron 25th power, and the life cell being a 10 to the 5th power, and anything that could arrange or rearrange or whatever in between. That level of importance for life to be sustained and for humans to be thought of and cared for on a level that they don't even cognitively or realistically ever like assess with purpose. So now, when that level of initiation and relationship between two extraordinarily important persons was never brought together correctly, and my body was left in some episode or some chapter or some whatever in New York. New York. And then the rape, and then the attempted murder, and then whatever happened after that. What was the purpose of that at human level? I'm just curious. Because when I turn on the teleportation device and I look for answers, I know what I was, what grief and reef and surf, SURF, I was left in for serfdom in dominion and domain. I don't need to quantifiably like communicate that. But when I was put in some form of excommunicate position without any assistance, I mean, it's forcible and, I mean, irrevocable tragedy on the horizon. And the humans just allowed this at some level. Whether they call themselves humans, monsters, aliens, it is still a major problem in spirituality and realm known. So now that's where I'm at. So now I'm looking at the teleportation device on the New York airwave on this January 19th, 2022. And I see a lot of incredibly aggressive messages coming through from things that are not of my species classification, genealogy. They're not my breed, they're not my family, they're not familial. And I am wondering at what point and to what degree or to what exponent in master mechanics they had to do with this false flag in an antecedent, like where they promote family values on the from the face to the humans, as if it's some societal benchmark that they want everybody to obtain. But yet I have to use a marriage certificate in order to name to known assailants for situation that arose. However, it was forcibly stuck into my innocence as I'm waiting for foundation and fellowship to come get me for more important whatever I was built for and I was delivered for as a cosmological constant, while also having cosmological genealogical correctness in one, we'll just call it one birth at the moment, for said other whatever. And I know there's a case study somewhere of importance, perhaps at King's College. My problem is I have on teleportation device a false king narrative because the genealogy does not match my king. So now what do I do? Where do you go in this New York under siege? There's a very interesting Kevin Costner television show called Yellowstone, Yellowstone, from Paramount, or Paramount Plus, whichever, where it says everybody pays. It has a funny gamma symbol with some other thing and beautiful artwork from somewhere. And it's a ranch where there's not many people at all. But it's a very specific fight between two people. Or two different whatevers. It feels very paradigm and parallel dimension intelligence to what I see coming through the teleportation device and what's in rebel army terms sitting around and fortifying themselves in whatever they claim by the airports and on all major transportation within the continental United States. And I don't really see... Now, there's also something that just came out about a Duke of York. I've never heard of such a thing. There's something called a Queen Elizabeth somewhere with a pointy shiny hat. She has jewels, she has big ceremonies, she has something called a monarch, the humans say. But nobody in United States of president level knows what a premier is, knows what a duke is. I mean, there has to be education on these things. In what a sir is, what do you have to accomplish? I mean, knights in shining armor, I get there's a whole society I've never even been introduced to. That's why the family is the way the family is, in some casualty and informality, because there's a cosmological constant that's broken in master mechanics and needed to quietly be resurrected and put back to the correct whatever, in whatever, in mathematical and polyscientific format that's been explained to the humans, that's been formulated out so they have some whatever in order to discuss and carry the message forthwith. What I don't understand is why my position becomes more and more dangerous without proper movement. For what and for whom? So now the teleportation device just announces there was only one prince I've ever heard of. I thought Elizabeth only had one child. That's what the teleportation device and the tabloids. one son and 2 grandchildren. It's all I've ever heard of. Couldn't tell you their names. Now I probably could, because now it's been more of like an investigatory from whatever they're allowing on the rabbit ear stations to come through. Just so I have some familial like vocabulary, but not in a vernacular secular way, just so I know where's the nearest royalty that the evil children from everywhere announce. Okay, great, that's one. So now at least I have a name of a familial member to reach out to on distress message, because I don't know. So now, just this week or last week, I learned that Elizabeth had 2 children. News to me. The teleportation and communication office only said she had 1 with 2 grandchildren. Far be it from me to know what the hell's going on the interior of their family. I don't, whatever. And I don't know how that works. I don't know what significance they have. I don't. I mean, I know they're significant in something, but it's very confusing at what ghetto level that I was left in, or I've been dragged into. I mean, it brings a new message to the word hoodie when I wear my hood over my hat so I don't look combative. But I don't know. I'm standing up and trying to fight for my own position to get back. There is formula in cosmological constant and string and quantum. It's where the words and the account actually comes from on what we can speak on. And even that has been disseminated in a large audience, but yet no results ever get done in my being able to be moved to a safer position where I'm not being poisoned. They're not attempting to kill me. I mean, threats on my life. It gets a little confusing. And then there's people that know these things that have to put in reports. And then what? The reports go unacknowledged? Or now they become targets? That, again, this doesn't seem to make sense. There seems to be more going on than is ever pronounced. So here we are on what is the teleportation device saying today. There's a man who comes on about Airbnb. He tells his CEO version of it. And I'm like listening to him and I'm like, so there's no credentials, there's just initials. There's no photos, there's no discrimination, there's no anything. So people are now traveling and in a nomadic format, but there's no vetting process, there's no safety procedures, it's just anybody's traveling anywhere. I'm like, that sounds like a direct threat to national security, my national security. Because how do I know what's moving in and out of the territory? What a crazy business person would allow this? Is this one of these circus tent, like, confuse and distract businesses that the humans have come up with? I'm a monster. I'm an alien. So whatever that means, I don't understand. And I mean, I can try to understand human, but it gets really confusing based on monster and alien stuff that I know I need to get to and am being kept from by humans.
Somebody walking around the house looking like a creepy version of Leatherface.
So is that baloney or not?
No, this isn't real baloney.
Oh, okay, all right. I thought it was bloating. Okay.
No, this is actually a mask for skincare, for your pores and to clean them, to make sure they're hydrated, just like any other skincare mask. I just thought it was interesting that they're getting into the business.
Yeah, I do think that's interesting, but did you really walk around with bologna cut out and put it on your face?
Oh, yeah, for sure. You never did that?
Okay.
Yeah. Playing with your food is part of being a kid.
Boys are a little
learn all sorts of new things about
Again, I don't know what this message is supposed and who they're talking to on the receiving end.
Work too. As millions of Americans wait to return to the office, many are seizing the chance to work remotely from anywhere, and a lot are staying longer in the rentals. Airbnb says nearly half of the nights booked from last July to September were for stays of 7 days or longer. CEO, that's Brian Chesky, announced this yesterday. Guess what he's going to do? He's going to be traveling and staying in Airbnbs over the next few weeks. He joins us first on CBS Mornings from his Airbnb in Atlanta. Hey, Brian Chesky, I'm so glad to see you, Brian.
Good to see you again.
It's confusing because this is like passenger. We're not talking Air Force representatives. We're talking passenger airline and travel from anyone born at any time to any father, just packing a suitcase, going anywhere in the world, and perhaps having the potential to stir up trouble just anywhere they go. And they made a business out of it. And then they promote it, which is why I'm confused at, I know I look human, but I have monster and alien purpose that I'm being held away from. And I'm not quite sure which level of human is responsible.
You, Gail. I'm so happy to be here from Atlanta.
Yeah, so I'm curious. Listen, all of us have stayed in Airbnbs. And I know you've stayed in Airbnbs too yourself, but what is the point you're making? Why are you doing this now?
Well, Gail, I think that the pandemic has very likely caused one of the biggest changes to
Now, pandemic, is that a level of security breach in national security? I'm just curious. Someone who knows something somewhere in the world that's far more superior than I have ever been acknowledged as. Because there's an outbreak that's first level, to my understanding. I could be wrong. Outbreak. Then there's some epidemiological acknowledgement. And usually in epidemiology, they want to try to cut off the viral outbreak at epidemiology level in localized before it spreads to pandemic level. So that's why I never understood why passenger airlines and building of multiple airports for unsecured air travel was ever allowed and promoted, no less.
travel since the advent of commercial flying. And that is because for the first time, millions of people, not everyone, but millions of people don't have to go to an office 5 days a week. And because many of these people don't have to go to office 5 days a week, they're not tethered to the city they live in. And so they can now potentially live anywhere.
That means there's no accountability either.
And so some people are choosing long weekends. Some people are choosing to go away for the entire summers if they have families. But others, like me, I can actually live kind of nomadically. And so every couple of weeks, I'm going to be traveling to different cities across the country and, even around the world, because we're seeing millions of people on Airbnb interested in doing this. And I want to really test the experience, optimize it, and show that you can actually run a really big company doing this. And it means a lot of people can do this.
So Brian, you're telling me that you went onto the Airbnb website, clicked around through all those pictures, and then picked the place that you're in right now.
I did, and I what I'm looking for is I don't really want to feel like I'm traveling. I want to feel like I actually live somewhere, even if I'm there just for a couple weeks. And so I'm looking for a place in a local community. I'm here in Reynoldstown in Atlanta. This is an incredibly nice home by this really wonderful host named Kimberly.
Now, if this was a tiny little research case study project at some level of containment, I'm just curious how it became a multinational problem and a multi-business making thing under one CEO of sorts, which I can't verify or vet, but I'm sure somebody in the world who has higher superior authority than myself seems to be able to do, since they have me locked in some chair that's just isolated and quarantined from the rest of monsters and aliens in some human unacknowledgement.
Really, and I really love great design, good Wi-Fi.
And
So
while
you can do
this is
interviews,
going
things like
on in
that.
like a cheerleading,
Wi-Fi
like
is key, that's
happy
for sure. And
business
I want to talk
moneymaker,
about a new policy
there's
that you
another
guys are rolling out in
conversation
Oregon,
next
to
story,
fight racial
way more
bias. I know
scary.
that there was a lawsuit settled. Tell us about that policy.
Well, I think just to step back, Airbnb is all about connecting people all over the world. On New Year's Eve, 4.5 million people were staying in Airbnb. So if we're going to bring people together, the opposite of bringing people together is discrimination. We don't stand for it. We make every member on Airbnb sign a community commitment. Now, one of the things we did is we worked with the state of Oregon to limit how much information a guest shows about them. So we don't show their full name or their photo, just their initials. We think this could reduce discrimination of hosts deciding they don't want to host somebody because of the color of their skin or their name. Now, the key thing is we're constantly innovating.
At some level, at some human level of they never know anything, they should be walking a path forward into each day, guessing and not having schedules that are definitive. That's how a human should be living, because that's how you've had me living while waiting for the chair at Monster and Alien that I need to get to. So now, if they're just unassuming and waiting for further instructions as humans, then there's an argument where this works, and then there's an argument where this is a direct conflict with keeping national security. Because now you have multi-nations without any oversight moving pawns all over the board. And then how does that get looked after, and who is in charge of that?
Innovating and testing.
Because at couch potato and human, being treated as a human and being left out of every conversation. I mean, there's some humans that have been brought into monster and alien conversations that I've been left out of. Don't know why.
Different ways to reduce discrimination. We have an entire team dedicated to this. And so I think that for Airbnb to work, we cannot have discrimination, because that's an existential threat to the company.
How has Omicron changed the game for you, Brian? Because I got my favorite daughter, Kirby, just had a little baby, and she's looking for childcare. And one of the things that she told me last night is they're going to look for Airbnb to quarantine someone before they bring them into the house, because Omicron is so off the charts. And I actually thought that's a really great idea. How has that changed the game, or has Omicron changed the game for you?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the longer the pandemic.
See how his face is twitching? They have this new commercial says that is called tarda dyskinesia. Just so we're clear as to what the humans are coming up with like funny, silly words with, I don't know who's responsible.
Pandemic goes on and every new strain keeps the pandemic going on longer, the more people don't travel the way they used to. They used to go to a city for a couple days, typically for business travel, often staying in a hotel district. And the longer it goes on, Gail, you're totally right. People are now looking to stay longer. Almost half our business is longer than a week. A fifth of our business by nights are people staying longer than a month. We have people staying for entire seasons. They're obviously quarantining, they're getting away. So
When they're getting away, yeah, that's confusing. Because why do some people have to get visas and disclose to some higher authority and power why they're traveling, make sure that it's allowed, and so on and so forth, with their business and company reasons, and like in some socially organized fashion of higher authority, which I don't know specifics and particulars on, because I've been left out of that conversation at human level of how and what the hell are they all up to. And yet here it seems you could stay a whole season somewhere. Now, are they checking, and do they need to check on visa status? And because I mean, I don't even know how to apply for a visa, I'll be honest with you. I mean, where do you go for that? I tried to go online because that's where Lou and Lynn said to go. But when I printed out the paperwork, there was nowhere to submit the paperwork. So if my MaxiPad internet or iPad Max, whatever, has forms but no forwarding address because there's nobody collecting these forms. So now, am I in New York? Am I in some like pseudo-scientific Frankenstein weirdo project? It's confusing.
It's really changing the game. The longer this pandemic goes on, the more the world never goes back to the way it was. And that means travel isn't going back to the way it was. It means that traveling and living are starting to blur, and people are truly living in homes all over the world.
And what happens if you find something, Brian, that's not cool in an Airbnb property? What you gonna do?
What I'm gonna do is get right on the phone with my team and say we need to figure out the root causes so no one else experiences this. And I'm already creating a list of ideas based on this experience. And I think that like one of the big risks of a CEO is you're stuck in your ivory tower, and I feel like you got to get on the field and be constantly using your product.
Well, Brian,
That's great, Brian.
don't forget to leave a review. It's part of being part of a community.
Yes.
We appreciate you being
Great to see you, Brian.
being part of our
Thank you. Good to
community.
see you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Ahead and first on CBS Mornings, author and activist Kimberly Jones is here to share the message from her powerful viral video that used the game Monopoly to illustrate Black Americans' economic inequality. But first, time.
Now, is that them in being equal? Because I heard it this morning, different headspace based on what's going on. The word, when they put IN and equality together, means they're now equal. But they've been personifying the word inflation, insecurity, in equal lengths, and so on and so forth, in a very misleading fashion when it just comes through the teleportation device to couch potato as a receiver and not being 100% altruistic in what their real intent is and what their real mission, objective, and goals are.
First, time for a check of your local weather.
We have a
There's the weather person. I'm going to pause this because it's getting awfully long. Now, I've never been to like a rally like what RALLY with cardboard signs and some kind of movement behind it. My level of communication has not been with humans that clear ever. I have different alien, monster, human, hybrid, all three of them. Usually when I walk into a room, I'm never quite sure who's in whatever substrate or auger and performance in their acting and activist careers of congestion at whatever I was left in. But they're showing what an activist actually looks like.
The economic inequality Black people face to the game of Monopoly.
So if I played 400 rounds of Monopoly with you and I had to play and give you every dime that I made, and then for 50 years, every time that I played, if you didn't like what I did, you got to burn it like they did in Tulsa and like they did in Rosewood, how can you win?
I don't know what Tulsa or Rosewood is. This is, I guess, a private mess. I don't really know if she's part of a larger conversation. It's unclear, unbeknownst to me. Because, again, I haven't been brought into this conversation, but now because it's being televised on the teleportation device, it seems to be pulling me in a little bit closer because of the public broadcasting, picking up on this message and giving her some form of celebrity status with a personalized interview as well.
How can you win?
Her powerful speech was filmed in the summer of 2020 during the protests across the country after the death of George Floyd. Now Kimberly Jones is expanding on her new video and a new book. It's called...
Again, I try to stay out of the headlines. I've heard of the George Floyd. I heard the name. I don't know what the facial, I know in a glazed over what it may have pertained to, but I did not stay locked into a conversation that was going on at teleportation. I missed the entire whatever it was. Again, trying to stay not too closely quantumly entangled with anything human based on my need for human monster alien receivership to be appropriated in the correct manner for my safety.
It's called How We Can Win: Race, History, and the Changing of Money and How the Game is Rigged. In it, she explains the history and impact of systemic racism in America and how we can change it. First on CBS Mornings, Kimberly Jones joins us right now. Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm great. Good morning. So happy to be here with you guys.
Glad you're here.
Now, in this viral video, it connected with millions of people. Why do you think that is?
I think that people like information concise and in a way that makes sense to them easily. And so I think it was something in particular, I got a lot of messages from non-Black people saying, this is something that I sent to my grandmother, to my mother, to my...
Now, I have received on YouTube some comments once or twice. They were really confusing. Some were hateful, some were not. I don't really, on my YouTube, again, because of the internet that's built specifically for my non-human purpose or whatever, I don't really have like a platform to communicate back and forth. People seem to leave like one comment, but in a specific domain string. I don't know if somebody else is monitoring, hopefully, because I really don't want that level. Like, I don't do chat rooms and stuff. I mean, it's already enough of a drain the way that this isolation unit has been built, and in this, it's between the gravity being so heavily weighted and the electricity arcing problem with adipose growing, being introduced first of all to my genetic, which should never have been, but it didn't fuse to my myelonic striated muscle, whatever. It sits separate to it, and it's some kind of alien, it's some kind of problematic tissue that then holds its own charges and then interferes with my connection to wherever I am, and it sits between the muscle and the subcutaneous level, where a region where they call fat, where that's located. And that disconnection between my muscle, my skin, and the atmosphere environment, the fact that the humans at some level injected me with something that grew the tissue in order to distance my muscles from and skin from one another so they lose contact, and then for which they call cellulite, and which is a human affliction, and then where I'm losing contact with the main machine mechanics of this visual spectrum.
To my aunt that I fight with at Thanksgiving, and for the first time, things I've been telling her, she got it.
People also respond to anger. We have a natural inclination to pay attention when someone is angry. And you're open in the book about how that was a moment of anger for you.
Yeah, and it was righteous anger, right? And so a lot of times, people think of like, well, if you're being angry, just calm down. You don't need to do that. But I think sometimes in righteous anger, you get to express to people your pain. And I think that's what people saw. Even though they saw an angry woman, they saw a hurt woman. And so they felt that and they were like, oh my God, the pain is visible.
I like what you said because in your book you said people who saw you as an angry black woman do not know you. You said the way you speak is cultural, not remedial. You were educated, yet you were socially unpolished. I would disagree with that about when you say that about yourself. And you said,
And then she speaks Korean, not just English, at the end.
said hood girls
A
can be
language I
heroes
can't
too.
speak.
Yes.
What is the point that you're making there, Kimberly?
The point that I'm making is that's part of what's happening when we look at
Or
what's
I've never
happening
been
with
given the
police
opportunity to
brutality.
learn, let's
It's
just
a
say.
bulldog perception, that anger, that the way that you speak, the way you present yourself, the community that you come from gives less value to who you are as a person. And in particular with colloquialisms and the way that black people have grown etymology in this nation. And at the time in which people are inventing it, it's told that it's less than. But actually it has changed the way we all speak. If you say, put your hands together, that comes from 1920s jazz culture. And so I want to...
Why does she get that level of education? I have never, that's where I was seeking out, interesting collector or weird, facts. Why is it that they have so much more verse and they seem to be so much better educated on so many different conversations and so many different levels, while I've just been left here in a really dangerous position because I don't know exactly how much they've acquired in monster and alien intelligence being in a human forum together or potentially together at any point. Any room I walk into, I have no idea what the human-looking things with ears, earthlings, let's call them, it gets confusing.
So I wanted people to understand that it's cultural and that we are the architects of cool. It's not remedial.
And let's make the point too that you were making that poverty creates crime, period.
Yeah, you
People
can't
need to understand that.
Yes,
It's a
I
big
tell
part of the
I tell policymakers that all the time when I'm talking to them and they talk to me about the crime, especially like in my city in Atlanta, and I'm like, you're not gonna have a conversation with me about crime until we have a conversation about poverty.
Now, is this only at presidential level? Just curious. Because I thought there was some kind of stop block where it had to stay, this conversation had to stay for more intense security purposes at a presidential level. So this way, other more aged, let's say, systems and organizations were able to handle other more pressing issues. While this is of major concern for me at the moment because of the changing demographics and what the teleportation community has been throwing in to my ability to view.
Now, you in the end of the video, you said that you're lucky black people are looking for equality and not revenge. And then you write that you wish you would have said equity.
Yes,
Why so?
I think primarily because equity is where we...
Okay, equity means she was coached just by the etymology of the word. So there's the subliminal and sublime divine intervention in the connection in the first time. And then there's the pulling of scheduled events and some interference that then's changing scripting, which is getting really confusing and getting really dangerous to manage at a much more substantial, lesser known about or spoken about or even able to reach level when you're just a couch potato, just watching a message from whoever's designing or trying to control the conversation. But which conversation? Because there seems to be multiple layers of conversations, multiple layers of management, and very, from my perspective, I've had very little education, vernacular and secular, which puts me again in a very vulnerable position at victimization, without being able to get to where I need to within the monster alien community, just being left here as human.
Where we are now. And I think we do a disservice to the people who came before me, the people like John Lewis and Dr. King and people like that, to say that progress hasn't been made, which is a universal thing that I hear. But I'm like, they made extreme progress in equality. And what we're looking for now is the change in equity. And so a lot of times, a lot of the decisions, the laws, the things that we're facing that are crippling us are economic decisions. And so it's...
So, she seems to know and be part of a conversation that they've been taught in a very narrow way. Like, here's this is our game plan, this is what we're doing, this is our history, this is like revving up the engines in a very narrow lane, which gives them a highly potent and quickened response at positive results. While I don't know if he's been brought into their private conversation, putting him at a disadvantage when he's able to interview somebody of such high level of education on what their human is up to. That then becomes a reporting issue and a major machine mechanic at beyond planetary problem with compromising at like biological germ warfare conversation. They're speaking, or it seems to be speaking, at a land and terrain level. But there's always multiple strategic and planning and advanced planning and retirement planning and all sorts of stuff that then gets really, really confusing because I've never been brought into a conversation at this level. I didn't think it was necessary based on the fact that I was purposed into Cosmological Constant for a completely different reason, with a special chair somewhere between monster and alien. And yet I've been held at human length with an immaculate child, no less. And it seems like someone's case study and research has been put on a dangerous path because of some kind of mixed relationships at, I don't know, sitting here, I could not tell who is responsible. If this is a business arrangement of some sort, do I trust him more than her? No. Do I trust him more than him? No. Do I trust her more than her? No. I don't trust any of them, quite frankly, because they weren't in my original marriage, my original familial fidelity relationship. None of them were. But now they've been brought in, teleported to my personal living room, and they're getting more airtime and conversation while I'm being held in a really dangerous position. And I already know at Cosmological Constant that there's more serious and dangerous earthly, like meaning the habitat, the pressure system, because now they use this word, which drives me absolutely crazy, black hole. But these are the people that are calling themselves black in some black movement. Now, are they taking responsibility for opening up a negative vortex and a black hole that is now affecting everybody and making everybody pay? Because it doesn't feel that way. It feels like they're becoming more aggressive and defensive because they've taken on this persona word and campaign and they're sticking to their guns. But it's causing existential, galactic level issues between biological warfare, mass migration, movement, and displacement. And then the Earth is, if you think of the Earth as a sphere, it has to have, if it's overweight, if everybody moves to the left, it's now overweighted on the left. How does it changes the motion of the circle? It now becomes, and the machine is put on a heavier, under heavier circumstances, where it's now being overweighted on one side. So it just like a drum inside of a washing machine that has a turbine effect. If the blanket takes on too much water when you're doing laundry and it becomes overly weighted and then it starts splashing around, it throws the drum mechanic off in the washing machine and then the drum breaks. That's where my level of concern is that there's so many alternating arguments and everybody seems to be like they know something, but then they lose it. They lose contact with what they know. And there's some people who shouldn't know. But I'm at the moment in the I don't know, but I need to get to something that I know I was built, born, designed for. And I've had some trouble along the ways. And I'm not talking about teleportation at the moment, although that's a part of it. But that's the point of having to communicate in front of whatever, to myself, to document where I am at Geopolite. Because I don't know what's transpired or what's keeping me or has ever kept me in this